Ymedia Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.
At this point, I'd like to welcome our co-host for the show, Ramona Singh. Ramona ji, a warm welcome. How are you?
Thank you. It's good to be here today, a day after the biggest warning that we saw in recent history of what we saw this war escalating day by day. So it's good to be here the day after to talk about many different things. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a sigh of relief, certainly. We all know yesterday we were all holding our breath. I mean, the language itself wasn't good, but forget the language for a minute. This was you're right, was one of the biggest threat. And I also mentioned early in the morning that there are just 10 to 15% chances of this happening. But if it does, I think it could be even more devastating than the First World War. I mean, Ottoman Empire gone, then the Second World War, the way Germany and Japan, they faced the fury. So I was quite concerned. So it's a sigh of relief. I'll still use the word. It's a fragile peace. It's a fragile ceasefire, fragile truce, whatever you want to call it. And we'll definitely discuss all the nitty-gritties here at our Ymedia Foreign Policy. But for our viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you, we'll also discuss the Ymedia political sensex because there is a major development there. We shared the breaking news this morning. So we will talk about Ymedia political census. An MP, she's crossed the floor. So Marilyn, I mean, a long time conservative. Why would she cross the floor? And how does this reflect on Pierre Poilievre? We'll talk about that at our Ymedia political sensex. But before we get into the Ymedia political sensex, Ramana, whatever you're listening right now in the last, I would say 24 hours after the ceasefire announcement, there are still lots of things going on. So your reaction on this, please go ahead.
Yes, we were all at the edge of our seats, I think, yesterday until 90 minutes, almost 90 minutes before the deadline last night, which was 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where President Trump said he has now, accepted a 2-week ceasefire. So has Iran, and this was mediated by Pakistan. So this was a big relief because it looked like both sides were not giving in to the demands, with President Trump asking for a 45-day ceasefire with the Strait of Hormuz opening straight away, and Iran saying, no, we want to negotiate 10 points on ending the war completely. So it didn't seem like either side was giving in, and it seems like, better heads, safer heads prevailed in the last moment because everybody was on the edge of their seats with just the language the president used. It was very terrifying, to say the least. We do know, and yes, as you said, acknowledge that this is, temporary. It is 2 weeks. It is fragile. We know that part of the 10 points that Iran had asked for, which President Trump said that they could negotiate on, one key point was to stop ceasefire, to stop any of the bombings, also included with Lebanon. And we know that today the escalations were above and beyond for Lebanon, and also with Israeli forces hitting Beirut, which is the capital of Lebanon, and the White House essentially saying that Lebanon is not part of the talks. Quick takeaway on that is it's unfortunate for Lebanon because it seems like it doesn't have allies. It's asking for allies right now. It doesn't obviously have a leverage like Strait of Hormuz to be able to grab the world attention in this isolating factor. We'll go into detail on that. Other things is that, you have.
Yeah, you're right there, but I think Iran has already said this, that in case Israel doesn't pull out of Lebanon, which Israel is saying that it will not pull out of Lebanon, it agrees on the ceasefire for Iran and all other areas, Syria, Iraq, but only one country, Israel is, the defense minister, I was listening to Israel Katz, the defense minister was saying, no, we'll carry on our operation in Lebanon. But Iran has also clearly mentioned in case the operation is carried out in Lebanon, which Israel, they did a surprise attack on Hezbollah. Iran has clearly said this, that we'll pull out of this ceasefire. So I'm not sure. Yeah, you go ahead. Will Israel agree to that, or will US pressurize that? This is a fragile, ceasefire peace deal. So maybe US will ask Israel, please do not do any sort of action in Lebanon too. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Iran has said that it's going to put forward some sort of, you can't say sanctions, but something against Israel for it, bypassing the ceasefire agreement on the 10 points. This is what was agreed on, last night when we were all watching, and Israel decided that no, it's going to go, for its own objectives in this war. Essentially, Israel's looking at occupying 10% of Lebanon's land, the southern part to the Litani River. And we know that the escalations have continued so far. When we look at what's happened there is that so far Lebanese people, there's been 1,500 people that have been killed. We're talking about 4,800 who are injured. This has started since March 2nd. We're talking about 130 children. We're talking about 57 health workers. And Lebanon has said that this is the biggest and deadliest conflict since the 1975 to 1990 civil war, and saying that these intense attacks are continuing and have now gone to the capital. So, we saw right after the ceasefire of Iran, Israel, and United States, many world leaders throughout Europe, throughout, China, Asia, everywhere said that they welcome the ceasefire and the talks to continue on Friday. But not much is said about Lebanon. Lebanon seems to be an isolated factor by the world leaders who have taken recognition of the ceasefire between Iran, United States, and Israel, but not so far on Lebanon, which is it's very devastating.
Yeah, and I've highlighted many reasons that this, as much as we welcome this, and we were always expecting that, and I'll still say we're looking forward for a permanent ceasefire, because this war doesn't benefit anyone. It has already caused a lot of devastation in terms of human lives, in terms of people who got displaced from their homes, who would want to leave their home, and also it has destroyed a lot of infrastructure worth billions of dollars. I'm a very strong supporter of building infrastructure. So in Iran, they have destroyed all this infrastructure. It takes a lot of efforts to build any sort of infrastructure. So from human lives to businesses, for people leaving their homes, displaced, children are being killed. So, I've always wanted this war to end, and I would expect a permanent ceasefire. But as a journalist, I have to mention the ground reality as well. Is I'm to Benjamin Netanyahu. Lebanon. The other thing is, I heard earlier President Trump talking to PBS NewsHour. He also mentioned this very clearly, that Lebanon is not part of the deal. And when I look at Iran is clearly mentioning that yes, we will leave the ceasefire. We'll go out if immediately Israel doesn't stop. And when when I'm listening to discussions from the Pakistani side, who's more of a facilitator rather than a mediator, so because the issue, now this is the issue that I've always been saying this, that they're not a mediator, they're just a facilitator. And of course, their position is very strong for Pakistan. But why I'm not using the word mediator for them? Because they do not have any leverage on Israel. As a matter of fact, they do not have any diplomatic discussions with Israel. And when I'm listening to Pakistan, they're mentioning Lebanon is part of the deal. Now, Trump talking to PBS NewsHour, Lebanon is not part of this 2-week deal. Israel has its own viewpoint. We are going to, and they did a surprise attack on Hezbollah. And I see in Beirut and so many areas. So earlier, we discussed this earlier as well. Iran and US both claiming victories, both on extreme ends, but here is a major difference on Lebanon as well. Please go ahead.
Yeah, when you look at what the Lebanese prime minister has been putting out there, he today put out on X saying that, in a statement saying that Israel has attacked densely populated residential areas. So it's not necessarily strategic. It is the devastation that's been caused. And I'm going to read the statement word by word of what the Lebanese prime minister has put on. He says, while we intensified our efforts to reach ceasefire agreement in Lebanon, Israel continues to escalate its attacks, targeting densely populated residential areas that claim the lives of innocent civilians throughout Lebanon, particularly the capital, Beirut. The premier accused Israel of disregarding all regional and international efforts to end the war, saying that Israel has blatantly violated the principles of international law and international humanitarian law, and it has never respected it in the first place, saying that, calling for Lebanon's friends to stop these attacks by all available means, really reaching out for help, saying that these are barbaric attacks, and saying that they're not respecting neither the agreements or the commitments repeatedly demonstrated by Israel and its disregard for international law and norms. And it also went on to say that over the past 15 months since the ceasefire agreement that was reached in November of 2024, numerous violations and breaches have been recorded without any deterrence, saying that Israel's once again persisting its aggression in defiance of all humanitarian values and disregarding efforts aimed to de-escalation and stability. So you have it there, right? You have about the latest stats are because 1 million people have been displaced in Lebanon. You have around that averages out to 1 every 5 people in Lebanon have been displaced, and a lot of them are fleeing to what is being offered as government-run facilities, schools, seeking refuge in these areas because it's just not safe in any of those. And there's of course strain with the hospitals when it comes to the medical staff. This is a massive humanitarian aid, and I don't know about the Lebanese army, what their escalations are, but they don't have any of the strategic key points that we saw Iran have in this conflict that went on for almost 40 days. Unfortunately, Lebanon doesn't have those advantages, and the only ally, like you mentioned so far, is Iran, and it would be a big stipulation if Iran doesn't stop the ceasefires, that everyone seems to be relieved worldwide today that there's a ceasefire and the Strait of Hormuz is opening up and there is passageway.
Yeah, things could change shortly, but for now, at our Ymedia newsroom for Ymedia Foreign Policy, the reports that we are getting over here is that Iran has blocked the Strait of Hormuz once again, number one. Number two, Iran is threatening that any oil tanker passing through this area without the permission of Iran, they will be attacked and destroyed. So clear warning by Iran. So I looked at these reports and I made sure that my sources are correct, and I've seen many international media outlets verifying. And then I went to the Iranian media. Yes, so Iran is clearly threatening right now. So there only one thing that they're repeating, that Israel must stop attacking Lebanon immediately. And now that has become the sticky point. I already mentioned this. So, among so many other issues, this is an important point. And then there are other things as well. I mean, U.S. is clearly saying this, that there's a sort of a pushback from the U.S. administration as well. I'll share what Carolyn Levitt shared. I'll share that as well. Though we know that U.S. Army General and the Secretary of War, earlier it was Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, they both joined in a press conference and they were claiming victory. They said Iranian army is decimated. We have achieved our objectives. We've killed majority of their leadership. And Trump also was mentioning there is a new regime. I'm not sure which is that new regime now. We don't know the names, but they're saying it's a new regime. So I doubt regime change has been done, but they're saying. And I heard U.S. General clearly stating this, that it's a ceasefire. And we're ready to once again get back into action in case Iran doesn't comply. Now, Lebanon is one sticky point, but if you look at the major issue, Strait of Hormuz, U.S. said, open the Strait of Hormuz, ceasefire, deal is done. Now Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, clearly threatening any ship passing through this area without the permission of Iran, we will destroy that, attack and destroy that. And Israel and President Trump both stating this thing that Lebanon is not part of the deal. So I think very different stories from same ceasefire deal. The facilitator, Pakistan itself, 2 points. One I earlier already mentioned. They're saying this, Lebanon was part of the deal. Now they're saying violations. Pakistan's prime minister has mentioned it. As much as he was thanking China, there's a story I was reading a story in New York Times which clearly says this, that China played an important role. Great. So Pakistan's prime minister thanked China. Their deputy prime minister and foreign minister Isaac Dar had gone to China as well. So that, and I'll talk about that as well. Pakistan, not thanking UAE. That's a big thing. Pakistan has thanked half of the world, half of at least the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Bahrain, Qatar. They haven't thanked UAE. Maybe they've asked their money back. They recently just asked the $3 billion back that the loan, and IMF is telling Pakistan, you have to maintain your foreign reserve in double digit. So they were close to around 11 billion, still struggling from the money from Saudi Arabia, IMF, and UAE. They wanted to at least touch $20 billion, but here they are once again. And UAE has clearly said this: 1996, we gave you this money. From 2018, we're asking it back. Now is the time. Over. You have to give it back. So it's not just the political thing at play. There's a lot of economics also at play over here. Ramona ji, your comments.
Yeah, I mean, what this war has done in this region, it's right now complete chaos. The safe haven countries like UAE that you could travel to, or Qatar, I mean, Saudi Arabia has been trying to appear more modernized. They just recently allowed women to drive and, allowed many different laws. But, UAE has been far more ahead in terms of its branding and, letting expats and foreigners come in as a place that they can do business and live. So this has done a massive damage to the security of the region because, any foreigner that lives there, they're looking at like, well, is our home country a little bit more safe, whether it's Canadians, Americans, Europeans, even and people from Pacific Asia. So that's definitely an impact. And of course, a lot of their infrastructure has been hit, like desanitization plants. That's been hit. We know that some of the oil capacity and ports have been hit. So this is, even though we saw oil drop, below $100 per barrel as, the ceasefire announcement was made, it's still, the issue is, they have to go and rebuild. And this is going to be a long-term factor. And think about also the American bases that have been hit. I mean, the roundabout figure for the United States was about $1 billion a day. We don't know the full numbers, but that was the estimated amount that, so $1 billion a day for 38 days is, $38 billion that they spent, and they had American infrastructure attacked in these GCC countries. So overall, when you look at this scenario, it's not a place where people want to travel now, go on summer holidays on. People who are living there are looking at ways to exit, potentially go back to their home countries. That is a safer place. So this is going to have I know we're in ceasefire, and immediately what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's reaction, knowing that time is of the essence if they release the hold on it completely, even though the agreement was that Oman and Iran will be in control of the Strait of Hormuz because they have the final tipping point when you look at the map. These are the critical moments and hours after the ceasefire to see what they could be reached for Lebanon. But overall, the long-term effects are we're looking at massive investments in terms of to rebuild Iran, but also rebuild the Gulf states. And what it also means, bigger point is, after the dust has settled, what does it mean for the GCC countries that allowed the United States to have American bases in their country as a protection from Iran, and they just got bombarded for 38 days because Iran said, well, those are key places for the United States and are targeting us back. So that's another conversation to be had. We know that Iran's been selling oil to China not in petrodollar, which is United States currency. So what does that mean for the United States? What does it mean for the relationships to say that we had those bases as a way to protect you from Iran, and 38 days went by and you didn't get protection, and you restrained yourself from not, of course, escalating the entire conflict?
Yeah, great points. You're right. I mean, we'll certainly have this discussion, as you just mentioned, that when the dust settles down, there's so many questions to be asked. I would one of the biggest question, which I think, of course, this will be discussed, that what do the GCC countries do now? But I think the biggest question will be, there are no two views. That yes, how Israel sold this idea to US. I'm not saying they pressurized, but it was one of the best sales pitch, I would say. And I'm reading a lot of articles on David Bernau as well. The Mossad chief. I'm not privy to those meetings, but I've read that David Bernau, the Mossad chief, the Israeli intelligence chief, was there in US. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, he also made his sales pitch. So now, what would be the relationship? Because there could be, I know there are many pro-Israelis who are saying this should not be the narrative, but this narrative is building that, what did US get out of this war, and the sales pitch that Iran is weakened, this is the time to attack. It was all built on how Israel does this. So that is a question, the relationship between US and Israel. I think that will be the number one question after this, number one. Number two, I totally agree that yes, Iran, out of all the, it's right or wrong, fair or not, Israel certainly has a leverage now in Strait of Hormuz. And Trump, when I read this statement this morning, President Trump saying that yes, we can work with Iran. Now they're ready to work with Iran on Strait of Hormuz, and they can both charge a toll. And President Trump is saying this is the best way to secure the Strait of Hormuz. So up until yesterday, US was attacking Iran. Now they want to work with them on Strait of Hormuz, charging some sort of toll. I don't know how that will work. And here I'm quoting New York Post. I was reading an article at New York Post. Now I'm quoting them because I'm eagerly waiting for the next 24 or 48 hours. Now, not much time is left now. So Friday, Pakistan's Prime Minister has confirmed the date. Mind you, we already gave you that date, that Friday morning there will be discussions in Islamabad, Pakistan. As per Pakistan's Prime Minister, Iran has confirmed, and Pakistan Prime Minister, he said he spoke to the Iranian President, Masoud Pezeshkian, if I'm pronouncing him correctly. So he spoke with the Iranian President. And New York Post has reported that President Trump is saying that J.D. Vance might not go because of security reasons, but Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they might be in Islamabad. So both the parties, I mean, Iran hasn't confirmed directly, but indirectly. But President Trump, I'm picking his quote, which I read from New York Post. So he's confirming two people. So most likely, I'm looking at that meeting, but my major question is who's going to blink first? Because here we are, up until now, both the parties claiming victory, but what happens in Islamabad? Will US concede that yes, we entered a quagmire, it's a difficult situation for them, and they were looking for an off-ramp? Will US concede? Will they blink? Or will it be Iran that, all right, fine. But I think the odds are stacked against the US. That's all I can say. Yeah, Ramonaji.
Yeah, great points on that. So, we were talking about all these points that the mainstream media is now catching up on. For these past few weeks, we've been talking about what was Israel's influence on President Trump. Why did President Trump agree to this war that hasn't been good for his presidency? It hasn't been good for the United States. We've asked these questions while the world was focused on the war that was happening minute by minute. We were trying to understand the strategy, the thinking, the logic that went behind how this even escalated. Why are we here? How did we end up here? To understand how are we going to get out of this, right? And a New York Times article has come out talking about, and this, I heard from many different sources, but now, it's been told that they had the Prime Minister of Israel enter the Situation Room in the White House, where he gave a briefing to, we're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, gave a briefing to President Trump on, the weak state of Iran. You had the protests, political unrest in Iran that was escalating, and essentially saying this is the time to go in and do a regime change, and really sold him on the idea. And there has been reports that President Trump got up, gave him a seat in his own seat, and sat across from him. So, this has thrown DC, Washington DC, in their arms up in terms of hearing their president with what would be war crime of what he would wanted to do in Iran in terms of ending a civilization for good, never to return again. His words, putting it out there, using the F-bomb on Easter Sunday, and just escalating the way he's talking. Essentially, you have the Democrats really saying, we're going to move for impeachment, right? And you have them also saying, hey, there's an option of the 25th Amendment because he doesn't seem like he's stable right now, which would require the vice president, J.D. Vance, and his cabinet, the president's cabinet, to overthrow the president. And these are safeguards that are in the American Constitution. That doesn't seem likely. I can't see J.D. Vance doing that. If anything, he's been sent to Hungary for their elections, which I don't know, foreign interference, unless what we're seeing there. But so that aside, is the biggest question has been like, what was President Trump thinking? And of course, everyone has been saying, this was something that the Prime Minister of Israel really coaxed him into. And Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, who were supposed to be there on Friday in Pakistan for these talks, they're the same two that have been accused by many different sources that they seem to be representing Israel's best interest, because when a deal was about to be reached with Iran, Oman had said, yes, we're just days away from reaching a deal. This is just a few days before. This is February 26th. And then you had Jared Kushner say, no, Israel's going to attack, and we need to, go with them. Otherwise, we're going to get attacked. And we saw what escalated in those days until yesterday. So it's hard to think that you have the same two people, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, there again for the meetings, for negotiations, because I don't know, they didn't seem to follow through last time when all other sources who were at those meetings saying, yes, there was a deal to be reached. So that's something to watch out for, definitely. And what does that say, right, about the president of the United States? This is, a world superpower, the world's greatest economy. What does it say that another nation's leader, in this case, Israel's prime minister, would have that much influence on him to, in a way, mislead him on what the war objectives would have been? And as much as President Trump says, this new regime, and you're right, the regime is still there. It's just another Ayatollah. But the regime is there. The regime has not been overthrown, hasn't become a democratic country. All the hopes of the Iranian protesters for democracy, isn't there. We're not seeing any signs of that. If anything, under the same regime, the war escalated and it continued. And the ceasefire has been now met on their 10 points terms to negotiate versus the Americans' 15-point terms, if you recall, that had put out earlier. So yeah, it's big question that another foreign country could have that much influence on the president, and the president has the buttons to the nukes, and he was threatening what sounded like nuke-like level type of damage to a civilization. So in DC, up in arms, and we're going to see those things escalating, I think, in the next few weeks. But I think we all are still holding our breath for today until Friday to see what happens. And the other thing is, Israel's showing that it's going to do what it wants to do, has its own objectives in Lebanon, and it doesn't seem like that's slowing down. So now the question is, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu has influence over President Trump. does President Trump have influence over Benjamin Netanyahu to stop this, this escalation of invading their territory, Lebanese territory, occupation, and is really what their goal is. Does he have any sort of leverage there? Does he have any influence? And so far, we're hearing from the White House saying, no, it's off the table, meaning I don't have influence and it's not on my list of things that concerns the United States. So that's the unfortunate part, that we're seeing this, not a balanced relationship between the two countries, between the two leaders, really.
Yeah. Thank you. White House spokesperson Karen Levitt, in her press conference, she's offered a lot of details, what we can anticipate in the next couple of days. Friday, late evening, Friday night, New York and Toronto time, early morning, Saturday in Islamabad. So Karen Levitt now has clearly mentioned that President Trump is going to dispatch a team. J.D. Vance, Vice President, will be part of that. You have Jared Kushner, you have Steve Witkoff. So Karen Levitt has just mentioned that. So this is a sort of after New York Post. I already said I read that article in New York Post, but now this is an official confirmation that New York Post was earlier mentioning this, that maybe J.D. Vance may not be part of this, but now here we are, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, they're all going there. So Friday late night here and Saturday morning in Islamabad, that's where the talks are going to happen. Pakistan's Prime Minister already confirmed that. Iranian President, they spoke to them, they're also confirming. So now here we are. Number one, talks confirmed. Second, I think even before this was, because this was an important thing, I want to confirm that, but even before Karen Levitt confirmed that, US is claiming a big, massive victory. They're saying they have zero submarines. Iran has zero submarines. Their navy has been decimated. 90% of their navy is destroyed. They do not have much of an air force left. So lots of things. They won't be able to achieve nuclear power. So many things. Lots of claims made by Caroline Levitt, White House spokesperson. She's clearly mentioning it's a big victory for US. Then the other thing that was part of the discussion during this press conference is US agreeing to any sort of conditions put forward by Iran, the 10-point plan or anything. Caroline Levitt clearly mentioned it's absurd even to think that President Trump would agree to any sort of these demands. And she's claiming that all these 10-point discussions that are floating around in media, they are all wrong. Now, let's see what actually will be discussed. So we got to wait for another, a few hours before we really get to it, because I would expect, if at all that happens after the Islamabad talks, if there is any joint statement, are we seeing a joint press conference at least? Are we seeing separate press conferences? Or once again, nobody would know what happens behind the closed doors, because I'm quite eager to ask this. Other part which Caroline Levitt has clearly mentioned, which you already said that, Lebanon issue was discussed. Caroline Levitt clearly said, no, that's not part of the deal. Pakistan claims that's part of the deal. Iran is saying if Israel doesn't stop attacking Lebanon, then ceasefire is off the table. Benjamin Netanyahu, he also came at a press conference, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also mentioned this, that Lebanon is not part of the deal, but he also mentioned we are ready to launch full-scale attack on Iran once again, if at all the conditions are not met. But Lebanon is not part of the deal. And President Trump, as I mentioned to PBS News, said that Caroline Levitt, she's repeated that in the press conference, that that's not part of the deal. So here is a major difference. Pakistan saying Lebanon is part of the deal, Iran also agreeing with that, but Israel and US and their leaders, we've heard Benjamin Netanyahu, I read President Trump's statement, and now here we hear it from Caroline Levitt. So that's a big thing. The other part is, as we were reporting earlier, that yes, Strait of Hormuz has been shut down. So Caroline Levitt is claiming, no, that's not true. She's saying Strait of Hormuz is open because, as I mentioned earlier, because US said this, as long as you open the Strait of Hormuz, we have agreed to the ceasefire. So if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, why did US agree to the to the ceasefire? But Karen Levitt is mentioning no, that's false. That's fine. The other part is that what actually secured the ceasefire. There are lots of stories. New York Times reporting, China also pressurized this thing. There are so many other stories floating around. But Karen Levitt said it was the hard talk by President Trump. That, and she says people can report whatever, people can talk whatever, but President Trump's hard talk, people take him very seriously. I mean, they in this press conference once again, not only the White House administration, Carolyn Levitt, the spokesperson, she's claiming victory for U.S., but she's also once again trying to underline the fact from U.S. perspective that yes, U.S. still holds the cards. U.S. is very powerful. President Trump's words are taken very seriously. It was the hard talk or the serious talk by President Trump. Now, I mean, we all know what was that serious talk. I mean, the civilization would be destroyed. Is that the hard talk because of which? I didn't see anything official coming out of Iran. Iran said, bring it on. And I know that we also showed visuals where the Iranian civilians, they were marching with flags on the bridges. They were surrounding their other, places, infrastructures. But at least I didn't hear or read that Iran was backing out. But they're saying it's because of the hard talk by Trump. No credit whatsoever was given to anything else. Yeah, of course, as I already mentioned, that Pakistan is definitely being recognized as the facilitator. This will be, the name has also been given as Islamabad Accords. So what is this Islamabad Accord? What is that accord? That's my key question. At least I haven't got a clear answer on this. What is this Islamabad Accord? If Caroline Levitt is mentioning those 10 points are not there, then what is the accord? What does it say? Is there anything? But okay, to answer that specifically, Caroline Levitt has also mentioned it. Let me put that across as well. She's saying, you know what? This is a diplomacy and this will happen behind closed doors. We are not going to negotiate in front of the media. Fine, let's wait and watch. That's the situation.
Yes, excellent. Good question. It's a very critical key aspect of what happens in the Middle East. So essentially, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, and the people who live in Israel have been under conflict for a very long time, getting bombardments from, regional players and terrorist organizations. And I have friends who live in Israel. I have many friends, and many Jewish people are my friends. So in my understanding from what's happening there as well is that there is a belief that these bombardments lead to the prophetic times of the coming of the Messiah as well. In Christianity, there is in the Revelations, in the chapter of Revelations, it talks about the end of times and that Jesus Christ will resurrect and come back. So there are Christian Zionists who also believe in this whole thing that, okay, I know this looks like mass murder and war crimes and lots of civilian lives lost, but what this does is it escalates us to the point of the return of the Messiah and the end of times. And yes, the people of the Torah do believe that they are God's chosen people, that they will ascend to heaven. This is what I would say is with Abraham. This is a covenant that was made with Abraham. If you want me to just quickly go back to the basis of it, is that Abraham had a son. And back then, and this is in the Torah and what would be in the First Testament in Christianity, where human sacrifice was something that was common. And this is a conversation between Abraham and God. And he says, okay, well, Abraham says, I believe in, just one God. And God says, okay, offer your son for sacrifice. And it was Abraham's only son. And essentially Judaism and Christianity and Islam call Abraham the father of the, religion that believes in one God. And Abraham offered his son, and immediately and God stopped him and said, from now on, you can sacrifice animals, but not humans. And through that covenant, he said, your sons will prosper and will have the nations. And therefore, that's when the nation of, the Jews, Israel, and then you had Christianity come from that, and Islam. And all three religions believe in Jesus Christ, believe in the end of times, believe in the resurrection. Even in Islam, they believe in resurrection. They believe that there will be judgment day. So there is aspects of this playing out. If you can imagine, you're in war. As human beings, when we have depression or we have hard times, we reach to prayer, right? We reach to the God we believe in, the religion that we abide by, and we reach for that for prayers when we want to pray for loved ones, when we want to pray for our situations. So if you can imagine, this is a region, these countries in the Middle East have been in war. This has been war-torn countries. Us in the Western world, we get stressed because of inflation or whatever. These people have a whole nother level of psychological level of disruptors that they've experienced because being in these war regions and the level of anxiety. So yes, religion will play a big part in understanding the scriptures of what does this mean? Are these prophecies? Are we seeing, or what you like, for example, in Hinduism, Kali Yuga, right? The what was prophesized and what would be in those yugas, and are we in those yugas? So same thing in other religions. So that is definitely happening at play. And then of course, there's the religious aspect, but then there's always the economic aspects of oil and territory control and waterways for shipments, which seems to be what the United States has wanted to do with Greenland, with the Panama Canal, with the Strait of Hormuz. Those are all key places for trade. But going back to what you had raised, yeah, that is an issue, and that's where it gets very scary for how this can go. And then you also have to look at what Israel believes is Israeli land, right? And they do believe it should be from the sea to the river, so from the sea to the Litani River, and that Litani River up to that is that southern Lebanese border. That's why they're very interested in that region right now. So we are looking at a lot of these things that are at play at the same time as what's going on with the economy, as the geopolitics of things, culture, religion, and talking about this, about the things. It doesn't necessarily mean we're for or oppose these things. It's just the realities of the region. So thank you for raising that, because it is definitely at play as well. Yes. What we can do is I can go over essentially the 10 points that Iran has raised that is going to be negotiated in Pakistan. Essentially, the ceasefire that took place last night before 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which was the deadline. Well, there was a few points that Iran put forward that was to end the war, not just a ceasefire, which was what the United States had proposed. Essentially, it was to permanent end of the war, not temporary ceasefire. Also including Lebanon is what they had put forward. Full sanctions removal. So this would be massive for Iran. Compensation for damages. We're looking at trillions of dollars of damages for Iranian infrastructure. Recognition of nuclear rights, which has always been a point of contention. Security guarantees that there won't be future attacks from, any of those, like from Israel or United States in the future. Influence over regional conflicts, which also includes the Lebanon aspect of things, and potential control and fees for the shipping routes. Now, that is something that they did not have access to. They did not have access to, of course, removal of sanctions before, or the nuclear rights. These are massive points, and this is just to show you the contrast between what the United States had put forward. Was the United States said that there was going to be a 45-day ceasefire, immediate de-escalation, and then talks during the pause, and partial sanctions relief later, and limits on Iran's nuclear program. So that is something that Iran said no to. They said, we want to go for end of the war planning, which the talks will take on Friday with key people. And I think the good point with J.D. Vance, the vice president, being there was he was always against the war with Iran. So perhaps he will be, maybe the adult in the room when it comes to Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who, I would say that, not I would say, the president said essentially led him into taking the decision on, starting this war on February 28th. So these are very critical things. The president has said that there is going to be some sanctions relief. This is something that would be possible in the talks, and but absolutely no uranium enrichment allowed. And even as far as saying that there might be 50% tariffs on countries that arm Iran. So, of course, creating safeguards around all the points that Iran is asking for on these talks. Of course, this is very fragile because we're seeing it as just a 2-week pause, but of course, we're also hearing reports on the Strait of Hormuz being open, or Iran not allowing shipments through, where all sorts of things are coming to forward on what's actually happening so early after the ceasefire.
Yeah, I think we're almost out of time. But I think we need to discuss our Ymedia political sensex as well. So we'll talk about the Ymedia political sensex, but we just take one last call on this one. Yes, Mr. Harpal, you're on the air. Go ahead, sir.
Can you listen clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, question for both of you guys.
Sure.
Is Pakistan natural choice, intermediate, or somebody choose Pakistan to be intermediate?
I think Pakistan, I told you, as a facilitator, it suits everyone. Because Pakistan has good relationships with Iran. Pakistan has a good relationship for now. For now, they have a good relationship with the US as well. Of course, they do not have any sort of diplomatic contact with Israel. But I would say, yes, that was the reason Pakistan was picked. And it suits US in particular. That's what I would say. I'll let Ramona ji also give her view.
There are parties. Okay. Let you further. There are 3 parties: Israel, US, and Iran. Iran has no say in selecting the intermediate facilitator, whatever, right? There is US. Why US is choose Pakistan? Everybody knows. There is Israel. Pakistan don't recognize Israel. Why he choose Pakistan? So now explain why Pakistan is a natural choice, or somebody choose Pakistan to be facilitator.
I've already mentioned this, that yes, it was mainly US. There's a lot of sound coming.
Yeah. It is the US who has to choose somebody to facilitate. That why would he choose India, China, or Russia? If he choose India to be facilitator, or Russia or China to be facilitator, so the all highlight goes to that country. China facilitate, or Russia facilitate, or India facilitate, because they are big powers, big economy. So they choose weakest link in that, weakest country, weakest economy to do that, so that even if it gets highlighted, there is no effect on US hegemony or US popularity, right? So suppose like India got US choose India as a facilitator. The people who question India now, they might have said India is compromised, Modi is compromised. That's why US choose India to facilitate. So people, if you have obsession with somebody or obsession with some country, you have always reason to blame, right? So when Operation Sindoor happened, then these guys cry, "Oh, India lose diplomacy. India lose diplomacy." But when India gets its own views, then these guys keep quiet. So when you have obsession with somebody, always reason to blame somebody. Number 2 question: if like Iran, I place India in place of Iran or any other country. If in a war or in this situation, Modi get killed or Xi Jinping get killed, You still believe India win the war, or India is in the high when things settle down?
For Iran, I would say it's an outright victory for Iran because I'm getting the point where you are alluding towards, that yes, their supreme leader got killed, and can Iran really claim the victory? No, it's not an outright victory for Iran for sure. I mean, but then.
Iran knows they lose. But I was talking about the people. Iran is the victorious. And they say, and I feel sorry for them, they say Iran is victorious and it has its own effect on neighboring countries. Now people will say Iran is very strong country. They will look at Iran at different point of view. I feel sorry for them. If their supreme leader get killed, all his front leadership get killed, sitting at home. Now their leaders hiding under the, like 500 feet under the earth. And they still say, oh, Iran is very supreme. Now people will start looking Iran as a different person. Okay, do resist because you are preparing for this for long. But if you do good for the humanity, if you do innovation, then people start thinking good about you. Not because you are hitting the missiles randomly at different countries. People start looking at you differently. It's not like that. It is your point of view. You are thinking how you think about the situation. But as far as I concerned, if you are doing good for the humanity, you're doing good for the innovation, then people start looking at you at different. So if some people think Iran is emerging as a strong country, I would like to see when they are going to go out of North America and start taking the citizenship of Iran, because Iran is very strong, it is victorious. Now, number two, people say US is like lose the war. US lose war every time. When they go to Vietnam, they lose. Then if they go to Afghanistan, they lose. But still, US is they are at highest point. Like they are the boss. What I can say, people want to go to US. So even if they lose this war, as we say, they lose something. People still come to US. They won't go to Iran or any other country. Whenever immigration will open, people won't go to Iran. They come to US. So there is no point US lose and people start believing US is down. So my point is, in this situation, in this war situation, nobody wins. Only people lose. Who lose is Iranian people who want to get out of this regime, who don't want this regime. This regime made Iran bankrupt. This regime, glorious past of Iran, decimated. So biggest loser in this war situation is Iranian people who want to progress. So that's my point of view. That's us on my view.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your points. First things first. From the Iran's perspective, I'm not saying they have won the war and they've lost many things, but they weren't defeated as well. This is my viewpoint. I don't think. I mean, even if they're still offering resistance, they're still. I mean, that means they're not defeated. So. Not winning the war doesn't mean they are defeated. The other part is at least they have a lot of leverage in terms of the economic activity. Of course, US doesn't need oil from the Strait of Hormuz, but I guess there are many countries still relying on those free waters. And if Iran, yes, of course, they've lost a lot of infrastructure in Iran. Has been there's a lot of devastation. Human lives have been lost. I heard Karen Levitt mentioning, they have zero submarines. 90% of their army or their navy, okay, fine, all that is fine. But from US perspective, I doubt they have met any of their objectives. And I'm not even sure whether US had any clear objectives here as well. I'll let Ramona ji share her viewpoints. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, those are some very good points. I think it skews the narrative when we talk about winners and losers. It's unfortunate. It's war and there's devastation and lives lost. And the people who have lost the most are the Iranian people who wanted a regime change. And if these talks go ahead, there won't be a regime change. If the United States, agrees with terms with the Iranian regime. So yeah, there's a difference between the regime and the Iranian people. And then what's worse off are the people of Lebanon right now, who seem to be the biggest targets. That is continuing without any aid or end of sight for those escalations. Now, the question on why was Pakistan, a player in terms of being able to come to terms on these between the three parties on ceasefire, three parties being United States, Iran, and Israel, all agreeing for a ceasefire and not massive escalations that we've been seeing in these past few weeks, is when you look at Pakistan, they share a border with Iran. So that is, a key factor that Iran is a neighbor. And when you look at allies, it has a relationship with Iran. And when you look at Pakistan's allies, you have Saudi Arabia and China. And those two specific countries were heavily affected in this war that took place, right? So when you look at the Saudi economy and the Saudi oil production, so essentially Saudi Arabia produces about 10 million barrels per day, and it dropped down 20%. So their productions dropped 20% during this conflict of 38 days. And on top of that, Saudi oil exports fell by 50% in March. So that's very significant when you compare it to the numbers of their oil shipments in February. So not only their production dropped, but also their shipments. And then there was a strain in their pipeline. So they have an east-west pipeline that they use. And the east one was in the Strait of Hormuz, which was absolutely blocked. So they started using the west one. The west one has, can make, its capacity is about 7 million barrels per day. And even though it was at its max capacity, it still was not making up for its total loss. And, at the same time, it's restraining itself from, really hitting Iran back from it being a target from its ports to its key infrastructure, the U.S. base. Even though it, took mass arms, they escalated the mass arms purchase from the United States for Saudi Arabia and some of those other countries, it still restrained itself. So it was really, Saudi Arabia in this sense was held hostage, and that's a key ally of Pakistan. And then another thing that propped up Pakistan to be in this place where it was facilitating the talks and getting the ceasefire is that China is another ally of Pakistan. And China, their oil, 40% of their oil comes from the Strait of Hormuz. Even though there was some China shipments to China, it wasn't at the max as it was before. And if you can imagine, China is an export country. They need the oil for them to be able to have manufacturing and export to the rest of the world that consumes their goods. So specifically, when you look at Pakistan and why was Pakistan in the middle of this, you had, again, the regional border with Iran and their relationship and talks with Iran. They already had a doorway to the Iranian regime. They have a doorway to the president, in this case, more than our Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And then they had the doorway of speaking with China, which is highly affected during this war, and Saudi Arabia. Shipments dropped 50%, production dropped 20% in this past month. So I could say that looking at it from the economic and geography standpoint and past, discussions and relationships, that could be the reason. Obviously, I don't know the whole thing, but that is just something I could offer.
Yeah, well, as I already mentioned, Pakistan, with that most respect, I'm saying Pakistan is facing all sorts of I think, economic challenges. We know this. Let's talk facts here. Pakistan is facing massive economic challenges over here. They've taken money from Saudi Arabia. They've taken money from UAE. IMF loans, one program after the another IMF program. They go into the FATF grey list, then they go into the blacklist, then they come back out of the grey list and blacklist. They're facing some massive economic challenges. We all know that. And for now, they have to, it's very difficult for Pakistan to repay the debt. Even China, they're charging them a lot of interest, and their debt repayment for China is wants its money back. So at this point, President Trump also needs, some sort of supporters. So when President Trump sees this, from Canada to Germany to France to England to Spain, he doesn't have many people, really, supporting him. When I say supporting him, I haven't heard a leader who's saying, yeah, we are with you, let's go all out. They're criticizing the Iranian regime. They're saying Iran has been exporting terror for 4 decades. We want the regime change, but they're all for the Iranian people. And clearly, I've heard, the statements have been very clear, where most of these countries are clearly saying, no, there's no justification for targeting any sort of civilian infrastructure. So at this position, President Trump, he also needs someone who can really, support him, and whatever he says, some sort of leadership that can really, second him, that yes, you're a great leader, you've been doing these great things. So who else other than Pakistan? US knows, Pakistan heavily relies on US for the IMF support. And there have been meetings. Of course, there's a discussion about crypto diplomacy as well. So I won't go into those details today. We've talked about a lot about all these things. Pakistan has also invested some money in lobbying in US. So there has been lobbying efforts, strong lobbying efforts in US. They've spent a lot of money. Actually, they spent more money than India this time. Usually, India spends more money in the lobbying efforts, but they've spent more money in the lobbying efforts. We all know that. So the cryptocurrency, one of the crypto thing was launched in US. We all know, some closely related people to Trump were also present there in US. So there's lots going on. So Pakistan definitely suits US. And as Ramonaji mentioned, there's around 900 kilometers of border between Iran and Pakistan. And Iran and Pakistan, they have been working closely. Yes, of course, they've had issues in the past as well, but they've been more or less working closely. And there has been discussion about Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, which was sanctioned by US. So now there have been challenges in the relationship. Why? Because Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, Pakistan has a defense agreement with Saudi Arabia. Iran clearly knows this. That in case Saudi Arabia gets directly involved in this war, Pakistan has committed to Saudi Arabia because they owe them money. UAE has already asked back their $3 billion. Pakistan, the only one country, China is not giving any more money. The CPEC 40, 50, 60, $70 billion, whatever, the doors are almost closed. So IMF has its, a lot of conditions IMF imposes. So where do you get this money from? There has been discussion in Pakistan. I'm not privy to that, but whatever I've read in the newspapers, maybe Saudi Arabia would give them 5 billion, 2 billion. Some commentators on TV also mentioned, why don't we get $10 billion from Saudi Arabia? So they're pinning all their hopes on Saudi Arabia for money. They desperately need money. So Iran also knows this point, that yes, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, the defense deal between them. And Pakistan, we all know that. Whether it was General Ziaul Haq, one president comes, okay, fine, how much money? This is the amount of money. Or say, okay, fine, no, we're not taking this money. Ziaul Haq refuses. Or if you have to come to Afghanistan, we need more money. And then in those days, they got a lot of money, billions of dollars we're talking here. General Ziaul Haq. Fast forward that to any general, in the interest of time, I can name many. General Musharraf, war on terror, tell me how much money you need. Money will be sent, billions of dollars was sent, and Pakistan became an ally. So whether it is US, whether it's Saudi Arabia, and whether it's Iran, they all know they can spend money and they can get Pakistan on board to fight against terror or fight any war. So, and that's exactly what Saudi Arabia has done. So Iran knows this. It's a tricky situation for Iran as well. So Iran also wants to do this balancing act. Okay, prop up Pakistan as the mediator, if not the mediator, at least the facilitator. That yes, go ahead, and that way you're facilitating the discussion. So hopefully you won't join Saudi Arabia, because Iran doesn't want to have another conflict on the eastern side of the border. So I think there are many other factors as well. But to wrap up, this discussion, and before moving on, I think President Trump, I hope there are some sagacious people around him because I'm looking forward now at the Islamabad discussion. That's my main thing. I want to see what happens on Saturday morning. That's exactly what I want to see. And as much as Karen Levitt, she tried to sound not being diffident, but we all know her answers. Because these are very tough questions. What was your objective? The Lebanon question, Strait of Hormuz. Whose idea was it to bring any toll? So many of these questions, I would still say they are unanswered, and I'm looking forward to what happens on Saturday in Islamabad. That is one thing, and who will blink first? Will this accord carry on for how long, or will it be abrogated? So there are many questions that I want to see, and let's see how it goes.
Ymedia Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.